Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Nikita. I'm the product manager for Tax 990. Today is a really exciting webinar because we have Christina joining us from Tax Bandits. Nonprofit organizations have so many things to keep track of annually, and we want to provide you with the best tools available to simplify your annual tasks. In addition to the annual 990 series return your organization is required to file, there may be payroll and compensation forms that are required as well. Christina is going to talk a little bit about the different types of payroll forms and the process and deadlines for completing those forms. During today's webinar, we're going to briefly review an organization's annual filing requirements to meet the 990 series form guidelines. And then we're going to look at what other forms your organization may be required to file based on the activities and compensation reported on the 990 form. Christina is going to provide information on common compensation forms and e-filing requirements for those forms and explain how you can e-file your 1099 and W-2 forms with Tax Bandits. Please keep in mind, we are not tax advisors and will not be providing specific tax advice. If you have specific tax questions, please contact an accountant or the IRS. This webinar will be recorded and we will send a video recording to you after the webinar. And we'll have a live Q&A at the end of the presentation. So you can post your questions in the chat and we will address them at that time. Okay, so as a nonprofit organization, you are required to file an annual 990 series return to remain IRS compliant. The annual return provides information to the IRS regarding your financial activity, program activities, and governing body. Your 990 series return deadline is the 15th day of the 5th month following the end of the organization's tax year. The organization will choose the 990 series return they file based on the financial information that they are reporting and the exempt status that they operate on. If an organization files a 990, 990EZ, or a 990PF, they'll need to report expenses and compensation. If the organization files a 990N, they are not required to report compensation, but still may be required to file payroll and compensation forms. Before Christina provides a deep dive into the 1099 and W-2 forms, let's review what qualifications may indicate that you need to file a compensation form. A W-2 may be required for anyone you paid a payroll salary to during the tax year. This includes expenses reported for salaries or other compensation when completing the revenue and expense section of your return, or if you listed a compensation amount when detailing the organization's officers, directors, trustees, and key employees for the organization or related organizations. You may need to file 1099 forms if you listed compensation amounts when detailing the amounts paid to independent contractors. This may be someone hired to do manual labor or provide a service. Even if you did not report paid salaries or independent contractors on your 990 series return, but you provided compensation of more than $600 to any individual during the tax period, you may need to file a compensation form for those individuals. Knowing that information, I'm going to turn it over to Christina so she can explain the details of filing the W-2 and 1099 form.
Thank you so much, Nikita. As you mentioned, depending on salaries and compensation paid, many organizations are required to file W-2 or 1099 forms, sometimes even both. I am so excited to be here today to share more information about each of these forms, their differences, their deadlines, and how to file them. I'll begin by going over Form W-2, since for most of us, it's the most common form that we encounter. Form W-2 is a wage tax form. It reports the wages paid to employees and the taxes withheld to the Social Security Administration, or SSA. A couple of examples of when you may be required to file Form W-2 are if you withheld any income, Social Security, or Medicare tax from wages regardless of the amount of wages, or if you paid $600 or more in wages, even if you did not withhold any income, Social Security, or Medicare tax. It's also important to note that these conditions still apply even if the employee is related to you. The filing deadline and recipient copy distribution deadline for Form W-2 are both January 31st. Next, we'll discuss 1099 forms. The Form 1099 series consists of several information returns that report different types of income that are earned outside of a wage-paying job, meaning Form 1099 would not be used to report wages to an employee and the taxes withheld to the Social Security Administration. In addition to filing, the IRS requires that you distribute copies to all payment recipients. However, 1099 series forms have varying deadlines depending on the information being reported. While there are many 1099 forms reporting a wide variety of different types of payments, the most common 1099 forms for reporting payments made in the course of operations are Form 1099 NEC, which is used to report non-employee compensation, and Form 1099 Miscellaneous, used to report miscellaneous information or income. Again, Form 1099 NEC is used to report non-employee compensation. For example, if you've hired a freelance worker or contractor, or contracted work from another business and paid them more than $600 throughout the year, you are most likely required to file this form. This form was reintroduced in the 2020 tax year with the sole purpose of reporting non-employee compensation payments to independent contractors and freelance workers. And the e-filing deadline and recipient copy deadline for the 1099 NEC are both also January 31st. Form 1099 Miscellaneous is used to report miscellaneous payments made in the course of doing business. In the past, this form was used for reporting non-employee compensation. However, from the tax year 2020 and forward, this is no longer the case. Examples of miscellaneous payments reported on the 1099 Miscellaneous form include rents, prizes and awards, payments made to an attorney. Form 1099 Miscellaneous is also required to report a minimum of $10 in royalties or broker payments rather than dividends or tax-exempt interest. And there are a variety of other types of payments that may need to be included on Form 1099 Miscellaneous. You'll notice the e-file deadline for this form is March 31st. However, it is important to be aware that the recipient copy deadline for the form is still January 31st. It is extremely important that organizations file accurately and on time. A few of our features that will help you to do this are simplified e-filing with the IRS, SSA, and states for any volume of forms. Multiple options for importing filing information allow you to add your form details manually by uploading them in bulk, or even using one of our integrations with Sage Intacct, QuickBooks Online, Xero, Zoho Books, or even FreshBooks. Just like with Tax 990, we have built-in audit checks using the IRS business rules to help ensure you're filing accurately. Our staff management tools allow you to add team members and delegate their tasks. And you can even schedule filings ahead of time to ensure that you meet your organization's deadlines. As we've mentioned, in addition to filing, the IRS also requires that recipient copies be distributed for Form W-2 and 1099. With Tax Bandits, you can distribute recipient copies by mail or by giving your recipients secure online access to their forms. The IRS has very strict requirements when it comes to distributing recipient copies. The recipient's copies must be postmarked by January 31st if you're mailing paper copies. If you're providing electronic copies, you cannot just email a copy of the form to the recipient. By law, the recipient has to consent to receiving an electronic copy of their form. With Tax Bandits, we can print and mail the recipient copies for you, or you can send the recipient a secure link directing them to our portal where they can access their form electronically and provide consent. Tax Bandits prepaid credits let you save time and money, and you can easily e-file corrections on accepted returns. Just like with Tax 990, our live, dedicated, personalized customer support team is here to help you throughout your filing process. And in addition to 1099s and W-2s, Tax Bandits also supports payroll forms like Form 940, 941, 945, and ACA Forms 1094 and 1095. The best course of action is to create your account as soon as possible so that you have a process in place for e-filing the organization forms in January and beyond. Now that we've discussed major forms that your organization needs to be aware of, let's take a look at how to e-file them. You'll begin by creating your account at taxbandits.com. You'll enter a few simple details like your email, name, you'll choose a password, add your phone number, and click Create Account. From then on, it's as easy as entering your email address. The first time that you sign into your account, you will receive a one-time access code. This will be sent to you via email. It is a 6-digit code, and this is just to make sure that you have access to the email address that you're signing up with. Once you've entered your access code, you're ready to start filing. You can begin by adding a business to your account, or you can even add the business as you file by selecting to start a new form. Today, we'll look at e-filing Form 1099 NEC, since it's the most common type of 1099. We'll choose the tax year that you're filing for. And as we mentioned earlier, you'll select how you'll bring your data into Tax Bandits. You can either manually add your forms if you have a few. You can upload multiple forms at once using our template, or you can utilize one of our integrations to import that data into your Tax Bandits account. For our webinar today, we'll take a quick look at manually adding a form by selecting Start Now. And as you can see with the manual option, the form looks just like a hard copy of Form 1099 NEC, allowing you to quickly and easily add your form details. Now, if you have not yet added a payer to your account, you can do that here. Or if you have added your payer, you only need to enter them once, and from then on, you can select them from your address book, and their details will populate on the form. We'll follow the same process for the recipient. We can either add them if we have not already, or if we have, we can select them from our address book and continue with our form details. Now here I will add the non-employee compensation amount, the federal tax withheld. Of course, you can enter any form details as needed, and they will vary from form to form. As you can see, you can also select a state if state filing is needed. You'll be able to add your state income, state tax withheld, and save and continue filing. Tax Bandits does have USPS address validation to ensure that the recipient and business addresses are accurate and match the USPS records to help you distribute your recipient copies to the correct addresses. From here, we'll review any forms that we're filing for this business and tax year. We'll review the type of form and the services being completed, including federal filing, state filing, postal mail. If we would like to provide online access, it's as easy as adding an email address for the recipient. And granting access. From here, you can see online access is enabled. We can see the full details of services we've selected, and we'll continue filing. At this point, you get to preview the information you've added to Tax Bandits as an added reconciliation option for you and your team. You'll see the totals for all of your forms for Box 1, Box 4, and states. You can also easily download the 1096 here to review for reconciliation and to keep for record keeping. However, 1096 is not required when e-filing by the IRS. Tax Bandits automatically generates it in your account, just again for that record keeping, but we'll continue filing from here. And all that's left is to transmit our form. You do have the option to schedule when you'd like that form to be transmitted. So if you would like to have it sent out later in the month, but you don't necessarily want to file it today, that option's available here, giving you time to go back in and edit the form or make changes later if needed. You'll also see the details of your order on the right. And as I mentioned, Tax Bandits credits allow you to apply them when you transmit. You do not have to pay every time you file, and they'll get you the best cost per form. They also never expire, but we'll go ahead and complete our order. We'll confirm and transmit, and that's it. You'll get a confirmation message that Tax Bandits is e-filing your form. Once the form is processed by the IRS, we'll notify you by email and update the status in your account, both on the home page as well as your 1099 W-2 tab. And you can reach this section anytime for more information on your transmitted, accepted, and other forms. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nikita. It looks like it's time for our Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much, Christina. That was such a good demonstration of how to use the application for Tax Bandits. It seems so similar to Tax 990 and very streamlined. So hopefully you guys find a lot of benefit in that. Let's go ahead and open it up for a live Q&A. You can go ahead and post your questions in the chat. Please remember, we are not tax advisors and we will not be providing tax advice or addressing specific tax questions. If you have any questions about your Tax 990 or Tax Bandits account directly, you can reach out to our support team for either product, and they would be happy to assist you with your direct account questions. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of these questions we already have posted here. So Nigel is wondering if churches are required to file the 990 form. Nigel, like I said, I would suggest confirming with the IRS or a tax professional tax advisor. Typically, churches are not required to file, but most of the time they do still choose to file a 990 form just so they can share their information with donors. And when they're looking for different volunteers or contributions, they can show them the proof of what the organization is doing with those funds. Anthony is wondering if you have to provide a 1099 for a scholarship payment. Anthony, that would be a specific tax advice question that we would not be able to provide. I would suggest confirming that with the IRS or a tax advisor to confirm whether or not that scholarship requires a 1099 form. Christina, do you have any information on 1099 forms that are specific to scholarships?
I think your response, just to reach out to a tax advisor to be sure, because there are so many types of 1099s, so many different ways to report, that I'm sure there's an area to report it, but we would suggest just verifying with a CPA or the IRS to be certain.
Absolutely, yes, I agree. Let's see, Rick is wondering about changing his tax year for his 990 form filing. So typically the way that works, Rick, is very similar to what you've provided in your question. You would file a short year for the remainder of the current tax year that you're operating on. For example, like you had mentioned here in your question, you would file a short year for 11/1/22 through 10/31/2023, and then in November of 2023, you could pick up and file for a November through tax year end timeframe. But for further assistance on that and for further clarification, you would want to contact the IRS just to make sure you're remaining compliant. Christina, Nigel is wanting a little bit more information on the difference between the NEC and MISC on the 1099 form.
Oh yeah, that's an excellent question. The main difference is the 1099 NEC is specifically used to report non-employee compensation. In the past, the 1099 miscellaneous was used for all of the payments it is now, as well as non-employee compensation, and that's no longer the case. Now, just that 1099 NEC is used to report non-employee compensation, whereas the 1099 miscellaneous is really what it sounds like. It's for miscellaneous types of payments. So there's a whole list, but things like rents, prizes, awards, those different types of payments that don't always belong somewhere else are reported on that 1099 miscellaneous typically.
Perfect. Thank you, Christina. Anthony would like to know the threshold for the different 990 series forms. Anthony, we do have a couple of really great webinars and resources on tax990.com with very specific information on this. But just for a quick overview, the 990 in is for an organization that has $50,000 or less in gross receipts at the end of the tax year. The 990 EZ is for an organization reporting more than $50,000 but less than $200,000 in gross receipts and less than $500,000 in assets. And the 990 form itself is for organizations reporting $200,000 or more in gross receipts and $500,000 or more in total assets at the end of the tax year. Christina is wondering the difference between doing 990s through Tax Bandits instead of just doing it through QuickBooks alone. And I'm guessing, Christina, I'm hoping you actually mean the 1099 through Tax Bandits instead of through QuickBooks. If you want to confirm that, then we can provide a better response on that. We'll follow back up with that question. We'll go ahead and move on here. Kirk has a question. I believe Kirk is asking about the process to submit 1099s online through the online Tax 990 platform. Tax 990 does not support filing the 1099 form. Tax 990 supports filing the 990 series forms. To submit 1099 forms, you would go to Tax Bandits to do that online. Linda has a question about filing a 1099 MISC for a foreign person or foreign company that does not have an SSN or ITIN. Christina, could you provide some guidance for Linda on that?
Sure. So the IRS does typically allow a 0 TIN to be reported on 1099 forms, and in case where there's not currently a TIN that's been applied, that's been received. There are forms that can be used to request that TIN or that name and TIN information, such as the W-8BEN.
Perfect. And Gretchen is wondering if Tax Bandits has a process for W-9 forms for the independent contractor information for filing 1099s. Christina, can you provide some guidance on that as well?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you so much. We have a very easy to use streamlined tool for the W-9s as well. Essentially, you can add or upload your recipient name and email address. They'll receive a secure email prompting them to complete the W-9 electronically. They can have a copy for their records, and you'll also be able to have that copy available in your Tax Bandits account for 7 years, and we can complete TIN matching for you with that name and TIN that your recipient provides. Essentially, that just helps you to make sure that the name and TIN they've provided matches the IRS database so that when you go to file your 1099s, you're reporting accurate information.
Perfect. And Christina, Linda did follow up with a question on how to file a W-8BEN form. Does Tax Bandits support that?
Yeah, it's actually very similar to the process for W-9s. In Tax Bandits, you'll just select the W-8BEN. It will prompt you to enter the name and email address for that recipient. They can electronically complete a W-8BEN, and then you'll receive that and have access to it in your Tax Bandits account as well.
Perfect. And a follow-up again, Christina had mentioned earlier the difference between filing the form through Tax Bandits and using QuickBooks. She did confirm that she meant the 1099 form. So if you want to just provide her with information on why e-filing is just with Tax Bandits is a more convenient solution.
Yeah, thank you. We hear a lot of feedback. As you saw earlier in the webinar, we do support importing details from QuickBooks Online to Tax Bandits. So we are currently working with existing QuickBooks Online clients. And what we hear is that e-filing with Tax Bandits is just a simpler process. It's more user-friendly, it's more intuitive. Our security and our customer support and technology are top of the line. So we just hear a lot of really great feedback about the ease of the filing process. And again, we have a full customer support team here to help you with questions just like Tax 990.
Perfect. So David is wondering about, let's see, David rented a church for band rehearsal and they need to know if they should file a 1099 MISC for that. I believe that's a tax advisor question, but Christina, you could provide further guidance on that.
It would be. I would definitely suggest verifying with a CPA or the IRS if you're required to file. I will say typically the company that is doing the paying is the company that is filing, but that's not always the case. So if you're renting, it could be a little bit different. So I would just verify that with a tax preparer to be sure.
Of course, perfect. Let's see, Barb is wondering what the process would be for the print and mail options, or if they are able to mail them themselves with Tax Bandits.
The print and mail process with Tax Bandits is you actually have a couple of options. We can print and mail for you, and most of our clients opt for that option just because even though it's another service, it's something that you're not having to spend man hours in-house printing and completing the envelopes and adding postage and mailing out or taking a trip to the post office. It's just a lot of added legwork to your already busy day. So a lot of our clients will just have us do that because it's automatic when we mail it. It just happens for you. But you do have the option to download copies from the account if you need to access them or need to distribute yourself.
Perfect. Okay, let's see. So John is wondering what forms of payment are acceptable for the Tax Bandit service.
Typically, you would complete payment by debit or credit card. I know sometimes an organization may not have a card available, so if you need a copy of a receipt to request reimbursement, you'll have a copy of the receipt in Tax Bandits. But if a check is needed, that's something that you could absolutely reach out to our support team about. Our contact information is on the site. The only thing with something like a check payment is the credits would not be available on your account until that payment has actually been deposited and received.
Perfect. David wants to know they paid a contractor over $500,000 to build a building, and they're wondering if they need to send them a 1099.
Based off of just the general 1099 requirements, it sounds like that's something that would be required. Without being a tax advisor, we can't say for 100% certain, but typically payments made to contractors of over $600 or more would be something that would require like an NEC, for example. So there's a really high chance that would have to be reported on some form for sure. So I definitely recommend verifying if that's something you need to continue with.
Perfect, thank you. Nigel is wondering if 990 forms can be filed with Tax Bandits. Again, Nigel, the 990 form is filed with Tax 990, and your 1099 and W-2 forms would be filed with Tax Bandits. Pauline had trouble accessing the webinar. Pauline, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar after the event, so just keep an eye on your email for a full recording of the webinar today, okay? Let's see. We have a question. If the foundation's account balance is under $50,000, can we use the 990N form? Yes, so the 990N is for organizations reporting $50,000 or less in gross receipts. You can choose to file the 990N form. If you're not a private foundation, keep in mind, if you are a private foundation, you are required to file a 990PF. And as I mentioned previously, we do have several webinar recordings available at tax990.com with a lot of information regarding those form choices. Another question on the deadline: if the fiscal year ends September 30th, then your filing deadline would be February 15th. And if you have other questions regarding your form deadline, you can give us a call. Christina, Vanessa's wondering what the minimum amount needed to issue a 1099 MISC would be.
Tax Bandits will allow you to add any amount and complete and file and distribute the form. So if you need to report a lower amount, that is something that you're able to do through Tax Bandits.
Perfect. Nigel is wondering if a 1099 NEC and a 1099 MISC can be filed at the same time. For example, we hired a contractor and we paid rent to another individual. Could both be included on one form or two separate forms?
The 1099 NEC and 1099 miscellaneous are separate forms. There's not a way to report amounts that are specific to each of those forms on a single form. But if you needed to file two different types of 1099 for the same payer and recipient and tax year, that is something that you can do in Tax Bandits.
Perfect. So we have a couple questions here regarding prices for both services. For pricing information, you can give us a call and we'll share both of our contact information here in a couple of slides, or you can visit our website. Tax990.com will provide prices on the 990 forms, and taxbandits.com will provide pricing on e-filing for the 1099 returns. And we have a couple very IRS specific questions. If you have questions regarding the status of your organization or your exempt application, you would need to contact the IRS. We would not be able to provide you with that information. And I'd be happy to share the IRS tax exempt hotline phone number with you that you can contact them. All right, so the questions have really slowed down, and I think we've answered almost everybody's questions here. If we didn't get to you, like I said, we're going to share our contact information here in a couple of slides. So you can send either of us an email and we'd be happy to assist you with any additional questions you have. We do greatly appreciate you joining us today. We hope that it was some valuable information for you, and that you can go ahead and get your filing done for your 1099s and your 990s way before your deadline. And like I said, go ahead and give us a call or send an email if you have any additional questions. And thank you, Christina, for joining us today. This has been really great and informative, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I loved, talking about the 1099s and how we can help. So like Nikita said, if there's anything that you need, feel free to reach out. But thank you for having me, Nikita.
Have a good day.